Hi, good day, everyone. I hope you all are doing well. My name is Dr. Khantilkar, psychologist, psychotherapist, speech and language therapist, and I'm also working as an advocate for autism and ADHD and like mental health. And today we have very amazing. I think by profession he is lawyer, but he wrote a book about neurodiversity, and he is going to make a different assumption today. And I would like to also know that why he have that interest in neurodiversity. Thank you so much, Sam, for coming to us today and giving us time. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. It's my pleasure, and thank you for having me with you. I've read about some of your important work in neurodiversity, autism, ADHD, understanding, awareness, inclusion, and belonging. And my own interest happens to be both personal and professional. I'm a law professor, and I've advocated over the years for disability rights and inclusion generally, and specifically focusing on autism and neurodiversity. I've talked a lot about and hosted webinars and events about employment and education, which I think are two key components, starting with education as a child is growing up, but also not stopping there. Recognizing how important it is to provide the necessary supports and more independent, and if possible, to gain employment and to live, all else equal, happier, more productive lives.
So you're saying that you're working as a lawyer and advocating for people who are neurodivergent. What problem do you see, and how you started doing that? Like when we talk about people who have interest, they might have someone in their life who is neurodivergent, who may be autistic, who may be ADHD or other form of neurodiversity. Why is your interest, or because you're a lawyer, and with some aspect we can say, okay, you work for disability, right? But I can see that the post that you do, the work that you're doing, it is more like, you know something that touches your heart, like it is coming from your heart, the work that you do. What what motive you have behind that? Like, I'm not judging you from your motive, but I would like to know that.
I'm not sure about the connection, but I think you were asking about my personal interests, and I know a number of people who have been diagnosed or without a formal diagnosis share many of the qualities and seem to be on the autism spectrum or have ADHD and various other realities and differences. And as a society, that's something we have to overcome. That's something that we as a society have to correct and have to appreciate and understand differences among individuals and to provide as a whole and on the individual level. The necessary in Hebrew based on the Jewish pronunciation, and I understand that you are familiar with the story of Yusuf, I suppose. And as part of my own background, my own studies, I recognized some of the fascinating aspects of this and my research with our contemporary understandings of an individual on the autism spectrum. And with that understanding, um, really
internet problem over here today. And before that, I was doing a recording and that also going on and off. So, can you hear me right now? Okay.
Not
Okay. So you're talking about your interest that you're a lawyer and you just wrote a book about, and you were giving the context of maybe some old ancient concept of Hebrew and everything like that. You also mentioned the story of Joseph also. I would like to know that how you have that interest and being a lawyer, because law is something you have to work on different aspect. I don't have this idea that how you have interest in maybe religion side, or maybe old thing. You could say that like something is coming from, because we understand that they have a long lineage of a lot of things over there. How you came to get this understanding, or how you make that assumption and you wrote a book about that?
So I've been studying the story of Joseph for years. It's a story that I grew up reading, thinking about, and studying in more detail. And as I studied the story, there are a number of fascinating, interesting questions that really jumped out at me, and I think would jump out on at any close reader. Any sensitive reading of the story raises questions: why he says certain things, how he rises from the level of having these conflicts with his brothers that he is not able to navigate, being placed in different situations where he says what seems to be the wrong thing, and at the same time being so committed to morality, to justice, and ultimately rising to great levels of what we call success, professional success, despite some of the personal interactive struggles he has. And that combination of characteristics resonates with many individuals on the autism spectrum. It's consistent with our contemporary understandings of autism. And it occurred to me that perhaps many of the otherwise difficulties in this story, the questions that arise that seem difficult to answer or to even understand, can better be viewed through the lens of autism. And as we apply some of those notions, some of the characteristics that we find in our contemporary understandings of autism, we could very well picture it's not a contradiction, it's not surprising, it's not a puzzle, that we can find an individual who at the same time struggles with social interactions, at the same time says things people can lead for being as honest as can be. Individuals who are being sincere, who are being truthful and moral, but the nature of our overall society is that sometimes when we speak the truth, sometimes when we're too honest, it causes others to lash out at us in unexpected and unanticipated ways. And Joseph repeatedly says things that are honest, that are sincere, that are well meaning, but he often says too much. He's often too direct in his language, and he shares too much of his own interests and his own goals and his own visions, his dreams per se. And as a result, his brothers who are not used to this degree of honesty and sincerity, they find him off-putting. They find him annoying, and they are jealous and resentful of him. His father tries to accommodate his needs, but that only breeds further jealousy on the part of the brothers. And remarkably and upsettingly, things haven't changed that much over the years. We see to this day individuals who have certain talents, have certain goals, have a certain degree of attachment to their particular interests, and they express this to others. And whether it's the school setting, where teachers may be well-meaning, they try to provide accommodations, but all too often those accommodations result in jealousy among the classmates, jealousy among the child's peers. So ultimately, moving ahead in this story, Joseph ultimately, through his honesty. Through his demonstration of his talents, he's remarkably talented at interpreting dreams, and his talent, his skill, his particular interest, and this is again common among individuals on the autism spectrum, have a real particular interest that, in a sense, overtakes their attention to other details. And Joseph has this interest in his own dreams and in the dreams of others that he displays over and over. And ultimately, he's able to interpret Pharaoh's dreams in a way that no one else is able to do so. And as a result, Pharaoh provides the supports, the accommodations. Not that Pharaoh's a kind person. Everything we know about him and the different pharaohs in
Yeah,
the
exactly.
Bible
Yeah,
are rather self-interested,
yeah.
to say the least. Their one goal is to maintain power,
Mm.
but as a result of Pharaoh's ability to see the talents that Joseph has and the skills he has, he decides to provide the necessary supports and accommodations and to overlook, not to be overly concerned by some of Joseph's social interactions that were so off-putting to others. And one of the lessons we may draw, I've suggested in contemporary times, is that when it comes to autism employment, an area, as I mentioned, which is very important and really coming to people's attention more than in the past, sometimes employers want to do something to help society.
Mhm.
And that's well-meaning, and that's terrific if they can afford it, if they can handle it. But when businesses try to hire someone to make that person feel good, and they don't really mean it, sometimes the opposite occurs, the opposite
Yeah,
result from what they were planning,
exactly.
which is that once again, some of the employees, peers, there's the other employees may resent them. They may not
Yeah.
want them there because they think they didn't really deserve the job. So Pharaoh wasn't being kind. Pharaoh wasn't providing charity to Joseph. Pharaoh had no interest in this Hebrew slave. What
Mm.
Pharaoh was interested in was the success of the Egyptian empire. And likewise, when an employer looks at an autistic applicant and honestly and openly considers their skills, if they hire them because they can do the job, then everyone benefits. Then the employer reaps the benefit of the skill set that this employee is bringing to the table. The employee feels the sense of pride and belonging because they know they were hired not as a form of charity, not as a favor to someone, but they're hired because they earned and deserved the job.
Mhm.
And the employees, the other employees, will be happy as well. They'll be satisfied with another employee who is doing, performing their job description the way it can benefit everyone. So, with that different mindset, with that different approach to appreciating and understanding each individual's both strengths and weaknesses, each individual's success and challenges, hopefully, as a society, we can better understand and appreciate and include individuals on the autism spectrum and other neurodivergent individuals.
Mhm. Okay. One thing that is intriguing for me over here too, because if you look toward the personality of the Joseph, it's not just about the dream; it's about the hard work that he was doing, and the other thing was management skill, because he was at the his skill was more like not just dream interpretation when he was in when he got the job from the Pharaoh. It was more like he was in management position, and his management was more like looking toward the food that they have to store the food, and he was planning and he was doing those kind of a things. So it's like he was a person of so many talents, yet he have to find a way to do that, or maybe it was the right time for him. But if you look toward his childhood, his father used to call him, if you watch the, maybe you call it your old testaments, if you watch them, it's more like father used to say to him that you are very naive to the situation that you have. You don't know they can give you harm, and his father was worrying for him all the time that they can give you harm, they can give you harm, they can give you harm. But if you look toward him, that when he got the job, he bring everyone, like even his parents, toward that, and give them pride whatever he was doing. But everybody was there, his all sibling was there, his father was there, and he gave them job also. So he, instead of being a person who can take revenge from them because they throw him in the well, and did bad thing with him, he chose to be a better person. He give them job, he give them respect and everything. So it's like they were showing the softer side, maybe the other side of the person, that autistic individual could be more than you think of them. And uh, there was a lot of jealousy when he was working. Like people were saying that we are more educated because he's a person, maybe a person of came from different background, from different ethnicity, maybe because he was kind of he bring to that uh, castle as a servant. What if, again, if I look toward the assumption that over here you make, it is kind of very intriguing for me yet, that it is not easy to find those things actually. Like in history, you look back and you start doing searching something in history. Even then, that is interesting assumption, that how you came to and you write a book on that too, doing that assumptions, and what make you uh, go toward that, to feel that and to let other people understand that it was always there. Because before you, I was having an interview, I was talking to that person, and we said that autism was always there. It's not just came out of the blue. Like before that, even day before yesterday, we were having that discussion, and we knew that before autism, it was even not Asperger, it was childhood schizophrenia. People used to call it like that. And after that, with the passage of time, things have
Right.
changed. Things
Mhm.
were always there, but
I think that's a great question. That's a great question. I think it grows out of the tradition, certainly the Jewish tradition, in terms of reading the Bible, reading the Torah, and the understanding that although these are stories that happened thousands of years ago, the lessons that they teach us are eternal, that the lessons that they teach us are not left in the past. And from the flip side, understanding that as modern as we are, and as advanced as we are, and as knowledgeable as we are, or we think we are, human nature essentially at a basic level doesn't change over
yeah,
time. And for that reason, we can read Shakespeare and even works from a couple of hundred years ago, and we can relate to the characters even though they live in a very different time and place than we do. We can read Cervantes, we can read Homer, we can read ancient literature,
yeah,
and it's meaningful to us, and we don't always have to look at the differences because the similarities jump out at us. We
yeah,
understand human nature, we understand parenting, we understand peers and rivalries, and we understand how siblings interact with each other. And we understand that when Joseph was a stranger in a strange land, when Joseph was a Hebrew who was
yeah,
hated
yeah,
by the Egyptians, who was oppressed by the Egyptians, and whose nation ultimately, not that far in the future, were enslaved brutally by the Egyptians and persecuted, we understand what that's like, and we can see that all around us. So it wasn't so difficult for me to look at the biblical text in contemporary terms. What was difficult for me and remains challenging is to understand the range of experiences Joseph had.
yeah,
Because as a character, as a personality, as an individual, there seems to be such a difference, a wide spread between some of his skills and some of his interactions with others. And that's where I think autism really does come into the picture. Um, Individuals on the autism spectrum and neurodivergent individuals more generally are often described as having what's called a spiky profile.
yeah,
Differences in some ways perhaps very advanced, in other ways perhaps very limited or with challenges or weaknesses. And that seems unusual when we look at Joseph's story. But if we do understand the character of Joseph through the autism spectrum, then I think we do better understand how it can be that someone at the same time, as you said, may seem to say what sounds like the wrong thing. But
yeah,
if you look more closely, what they're saying is actually correct.
yeah,
They're just expressing it in a way that society deems to be incorrect. That what they're doing, and as you said, he has no interest in harming other people. If anything, he does seem to have that naivete, as you described it. He seems to be naive about the dangers that others are imposing on him, whether it's his brothers or whether it's the wife of Potiphar or others who may have resentment toward him, who may be jealous of him, as you said, or, when he's appointed by Pharaoh,
Yeah,
the Egyptians aren't particularly happy, right? All of Pharaoh's servants are wondering, who is this person? Who is this Hebrew slave who is now usurping what we consider to be our right place
yeah,
as Pharaoh's trusted servant? So it really took a lot of understanding on the part of others who recognized his talents. And again, not necessarily because they were well meaning. I have no reason to think Pharaoh was doing this to help Joseph in
exactly.
particular. Pharaoh did this to help himself, but it was a reality and it remains a reality that above all, individuals, neurodivergent individuals, just like anyone else, require respect, require understanding and
Yeah,
appreciation for who they are. And with that, empathy on the part of society, understanding and appreciation, there's more of a potential for integration, for success, and for belonging.
yeah. And I belong to a Muslim background, and I have interest in, because I have read a lot of literature. I have read a lot of religion, and I was always, because I always think that there's a lot of missing the thing that we came to us. I'm not talking about the book that we have, the Holy Quran that we have. I'm talking about the texts that come to us. Maybe books in any form. Maybe it's time we need to more about those things. More about the prophet that we have, the people that they come to us, the books that we have, because if you look toward the people, if you look toward that culture, if you look toward that promised land, if you talk about, because still people are searching for that promised land and they're still fighting over that thing. That fighting is not over yet. You know this already, that this fighting is still going on, and this fighting came from that time, like it came from Joseph time period, and it's still. What do you think, what is happening over there? They're still not able to understand that culture of being unique, being oppressed, and doing a lot of things, because he was a very successful person, and because he was loved by a lot of people there. He was kind, he was loved, he was serving justice, he was giving, even if you look toward the cup that he had, it was one cup for everyone, maybe, it was how many people is in the family, and it will serve according to that. And like, you have to come with line, and you need to give the proper information. If you will do something like that, if you will lie over here, so that a strong justice is coming over here on that aspect. Even then, do you think that a lot of things are missing over there, and the promised land, whatever it is, like, I don't want to be this to be a controversial thing, because that is not my place to talk about those things. I'm not a religious scholars, but I have read a lot of text. I have that interest in history, in religion. uh, I'm a therapist by myself, and so many things are there, but still, uh, the things that we did make sense. Actually, we cannot say that it is not, it didn't happen. We cannot deny the existence of those things. What do you think?
Well, in terms of the history, and your point is well taken in terms of the information, we're looking at a text that's thousands of years old. What I found fascinating in my study, and if you look at my book, although I base my overall analysis on the text itself alone, I think the text does support a reading of Understanding Joseph on the Autism Spectrum. What really made the case for me and what jumped out at me was looking at the commentators, because there's this tradition within the Jewish understanding of the text of ongoing interpretation and application and understanding of the stories in the Torah, in the Bible. And as you mentioned, this wasn't called autism
Yeah,
thousands of years ago. We didn't even call this autism 100 years ago. And we had a very different view of autism even a couple of decades ago, if not even more recently. But commentators throughout the generations and throughout the world, through thousands of years, going back to Talmudic times, literally ancient times, to medieval times, and different parts all over the world. Commentators, scholars who lived in 15th century Spain, scholars who lived in the land of Israel thousands of years ago or in more recent times, scholars who lived throughout different parts of Europe, scholars who live in the United States. In viewing the story of Joseph, they certainly did not use the term autism. They couldn't have used the term autism, but they described an individual who had that degree of purity, that degree of, as you said, kind of naivete, that degree of a commitment to justice and to truth, an individual who, as they observe, also often says things
Mhm.
that seem puzzling, that seem upsetting to people around them, even though what they're saying makes a lot of sense, even though what they're saying is eminently true. The problem lies with the way Joseph communicates to others, and the problem lies in the way that they perceive and react to him. And without ascribing any fault, if there is any fault, I'd have to say it would be with the brothers who isolate and marginalize Joseph. But looking beyond trying to find fault, because that wasn't Joseph's goal either. He was looking for understanding. He was looking for communication. He was looking to reunite with his brothers, which, as you mentioned, he ultimately achieved, and he forgave them.
Yeah, exactly.
They were, and they were surprised.
Yeah,
They thought until much later in the story, until even when Jacob passes away,
yeah,
they think this is the time that Joseph's finally going to mete out his revenge, and he's not interested in revenge.
yeah.
He's not interested in harming them. He is interested in having them realize what they've done. And that's why he manufactures this whole scenario where they have to admit to themselves, to him, but more so to themselves,
Yeah,
that what they had done was incorrect. And through that realization, they can achieve repentance,
yeah,
they can achieve reconciliation with him,
yeah,
and that's what his goals are. So it's fascinating that this is the way scholars, Jewish scholars, through generations all over the world, have looked at pieces of the story. And I think in contemporary times, we can likewise understand their interpretations through our contemporary
mhm,
views of autism.
yeah. And you know what? What is there's one thing more to that story too, because the brother was jealous because he have to play all the time. He was so playful. He would stay in his house and he would just play with little brother and don't do the chore the other brother was doing. He have to work very little. Maybe he was having some kind of trouble in working. He could not work a lot. We don't know because we were not there at that time. But it looked like that he have to work less and brother was, because brother have to do a lot of physical work and he was there, he was not doing. And the other thing over here is that he make them but it is called like you're a law person, you know that convicted, like they were convicted criminal. He tell them they need to tell everybody what they did to him, then after that he forgive them. Isn't that the part of that story also? Because the brother tell everything to everyone that this is that we did, and after that he forgive them.
Right. So I suggest in the book that if you read the story very closely, through the earlier parts of the story, Joseph, as an individual on the autism spectrum, often says things that are misunderstood by others.
Yeah,
And at the same time, he doesn't understand why they're reacting the way they are. If he's being honest with them, why would they turn negative towards him? And worse, why would they punish him for telling the truth? So as the story proceeds, it turns out that the time Joseph finally reveals himself to his brothers in Egypt and ultimately forgives them is when Judah expresses the same sense of puzzlement. When Judah says, "What happened here? I don't understand." And Judah admits that they did something wrong. And he speaks to, not knowing this is Joseph, speaks to this Egyptian viceroy in ways that are very sincere, very honest, but seems to get himself in trouble. And the brothers continually, when they're in Egypt, they say the wrong things. They say things that are truthful, but it ends up harming them. So they now are experiencing what Joseph had experienced previously. And for that reason, once they have truly recognized the way they had treated him,
mhm.
once they had truly acknowledged the wrongfulness of their conduct, now Joseph's ready to forgive them and to reconcile with them.
And you know, there's one other thing to that story too, which I would like to mention over here too, that he give the same amount of food which he give to other people. Like he did not favor his family over here. It was same for his family too. So I think that is also maybe the thing that we are talking about continuously in this discussion, that the justice is there, morality is there. People even say that, okay, they can lie to, yes, they lie. It's not like autistic people, autistic individual cannot lie. Yes, they lie. Sometimes they want to, they are obsessed too. It's because at the end of the day, we all are human beings. It's not that we cannot do what other people are not doing. We did not come from a planet. We did not come from Mars. We live here. We grow here. And uh, masking is there always. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it is. Sometimes, a day before yesterday, somebody was telling me that a friend of hers said, "Why you are copying me?" Like, it is like when we are talking to somebody, we are imitating that person, and it is something like that. Like, you go to some place and you're like a water and you take the shape of that thing. So it's not that you are somehow, not original. It's like it's your coping mechanism that you adopt. And if you look toward the Joseph, he did a lot of masking over there. He was just like them. He was acting like them. He was sitting like them, maybe. He was talking like them, maybe. And he was doing everything. And he was, the way he talked, maybe the way he talked to his brother, the way he talked to other people, it's same. But what I would like to know over here is, um, how much time it took for you to come up with that thing, that conclusion, the book that you have, how much time it took?
Well, I just want to mention on the point of masking, I think that's an excellent point, and it's worth mentioning in passing that as readers look at the book, I generally didn't use terms like masking per se, some of those technical terms, because I did want the book to be
Exactly.
available and accessible to people who didn't have those understandings
Yeah,
of the terms of art, the technical terms. But you're exactly right. What I describe is Joseph, and I say he takes on a persona, is the word I use.
yeah, because
He takes
persona is personality word. We use that in psychology. We use persona. We don't call it masking. Masking is something
exactly right. He takes on a persona,
That's what
and
persona.
he speaks in a way that's unexpected. He's very tough on his brothers, as you mentioned. He doesn't treat them differently. If anything, he's harsher toward them than he is towards others, and that's surprising because he is so good-natured generally. He does mean well. So at first glance, it seems surprising that he would talk this way, but I think you're right. It is this form of what we'd call masking, in the sense that he feels like he has to act this way to teach them the lesson.
Yeah,
He doesn't want to hurt them. He doesn't mean to harm them. He's trying to lead them back. He's trying to help them understand, trying to explain to them or demonstrate to them just how he felt during those years and continues to feel when others are tricky towards him, when others take unfair advantage of him, and he takes on their persona. But that's not the real Joseph. The real Joseph comes out once he reveals himself to his brothers, and the real Joseph is a Joseph who reconciles, forgives them, and he's the one who brings about their reconciliation. In terms of how long, it took to write the book, it's a great question. On some level, as I mentioned, this is a study that I've been engaged in since when I was growing up, when I would read the stories. So I did have pieces of the story of Joseph and research, an extensive amount of research of the story in mind. And at the same time, as I continued my experiences working with individuals on the autism spectrum, it really jumped out at me at one day that perhaps the most puzzling aspect of the story at the very beginning, when he's telling his dreams to his brothers, and it makes you wonder, why does he persist and insist on telling the dreams when it gets them upset? And I think it jumps out at the sensitive reader who's familiar with autism that it's not surprising, or at least it's something we do encounter fairly often when someone who is autistic has something to say that they consider to be important,
yeah,
even if the listeners don't want to hear what they have to say,
yeah,
and even if the listeners have expressed that they don't want the person to keep talking about this topic, if it's so important to them, and especially if they think it's for their good.
yeah,
Joseph believes that's important for the brothers to hear what he has to say. And for that reason, he doesn't hold back. For
yeah,
that reason, he says something that ends up coming back to harm him.
yeah,
And I think it was that thought that first occurred to me. And then as I continued to look through the story through that lens, and I continued to conduct further research, as I mentioned, drawing upon the commentators from thousands of years of history, it seemed to me that one theory after another, one explanation after another can be seen as consistent. It's not the only explanation, and there are many, many ways to interpret biblical texts. There are many, many ways to interpret different great literature over the years. And again, part of the Jewish tradition is that there are endless meanings and lessons
Yeah.
and interpretations from the divine biblical text. But it seemed to me that one of these ways of interpreting this story, and a way that pieces together many of the different aspects of Joseph's personality and his interactions with others, and the way he's understood and viewed through commentators, is very much through the lens of autism and neurodiversity.
There's something over here too, because you were just talking about why he keep on talking about his dream, because he used to have a lot of nightmares also, and nightmares are warning, and nightmares were like you wake up from a bad dream, and he used to tell that dream to his father, and his father was saying, okay, these are warning, this is going to happen and this is going to happen. And when, if we talk about autistic community, autistic and neurodivergent community, or neurodivergent individual, if there is a harm, something is coming to family, something is coming toward their family members, their siblings, their family, they are too much worried for them, because their nervous system is more like fight, flight, freeze, and fawn response. So they have to do something. They took, it's like they're responsible for making peace, or their whole being is over there. You could say that the whole being is challenged over there. The humanity is challenged over there, because for them, what they are, they're everywhere. They're not inside, it's outside. So they have a very small world around them, because he was not going outside the house. Maybe if he was going very little. So for him, his world was very limited, and he was to keep them safe. And if you talk about autism, it's about the order, that this should happen, this should happen, this should happen. If it's not happening, I should make some amends before it get wrong, something get wrong, or some emergency emerge. So I think that was the part of the story. If I'm making over sense over here, or getting the idea, maybe that's was the reason that he was saying this, telling
I
his.
think that's an interesting
And that's
thought
the
because
thing
we
of
do.
special interest too. Over here, special interest also come. If you have special interest, and if you're autistic, you want to talk about that all the time, like endlessly. I have seen thousand, maybe 9:30. Somebody was telling me about her child. There was a woman, she was telling me her child has 9:30 dinosaurs.
Right.
We have seen somebody have 1,000 cars in their room. So it's about special interest. It's about danger. So there are so many things going on over here.
But that's an excellent point. And I do think it is that kind of special interest, that focus, which can be very effective and can be very productive. And it's important not to stereotype. It's important not to overgeneralize. But one area where I have found successful, I've studied and I've visited and I've conducted webinars on autism employment programs. And one of the areas I found these programs to be successful is in identifying that area of special interest. And rather than criticizing someone, rather than finding fault with someone for having a particular area of interest, to build on that as an area of strength. If someone's very interested in dinosaurs, well, maybe there's a way to take that interest and to apply it in a particular context. If someone has a particular interest in trains and airplanes, which we do find from time to time among individuals on the autism spectrum, so maybe we can find an area of employment that can build on that interest rather than finding it to be negative or a distraction, or if anything, an area of criticism, which is completely unwarranted and uncalled for. To the point of structure, I think we do see that as well. I think it's very common. And again, these are generalizations, but I think there's a lot of evidence to support that many, many individuals on the autism spectrum like to have structures, like to have reliability, like to have things continue the way they have been. Their expectations should be consistent rather than having surprises. That's sometimes called inflexible. Again, not as a moral judgment, but as a description of being more comfortable when these structures remain consistent and stable. And I think you find in the story that Joseph continues to look for that structure. He's trying to find a way to fit in, whether it's with his brothers or whether it's with, of all things, the wife of Potiphar. And part of what happens is he continues going to work even though she has her insidious plans. He doesn't recognize, or if he does recognize her plans, he overlooks them because he has a job to do.
Yeah.
And as he tells her, he's going to be faithful to that job. He wants to maintain those structures and he's not going to let that go. He's not going to move on to something else or resist or deny what he's been told properly to do. And she approaches him in a way that would defy the orders and the loyalty that he has to his employers. And that's why he has his strength. It ends up harming him. But we have to admire his courage and his insistence on morality and his willingness to stand up to her, despite the fact that she's so powerful and so cunning.
Yeah.
And we see that characteristic throughout the story, where he continues to do what he considers to be the right thing, even though it may end up harming him. He continues to do what he believes he has been told to do. When his father tells him to go find his brothers, he goes to find his brothers and he persists, even though it would have been convenient to do otherwise, even though he had excuses not to do so. He continues because he believes in the correct way of what he is doing. And he believes that these structures, that the way things are set up, are appropriate and he should continue in that way.
You know, the way that you're describing, that was the main incident that is too much highlighted over here, or maybe people don't highlight, but it is an incident which make him go to the jail maybe. The point over here is that he continuously he's standing up for himself, without thinking of, the point is he's telling the truth no matter how much it get into trouble. That this is what you are trying to describe over here. But when you were talking about that, before we just started our discussion, that came into my mind. If you look toward scientists that we have, many personality is coming into that fit. The spectrum is there, autism spectrum is there somehow, and we can relate to that spectrum too. Do you think that, or do you find some other personality in the history, maybe in the present or maybe the past, if you look toward the history side, some other personalities fitting into that dimension or not? What do you think?
That's a great question. And I imagine you've read, as I have, a lot of theories along those lines. And just to emphasize, these are theories, these are speculative. Obviously, they're not clinical diagnoses. You
Yeah,
can't diagnose someone without meeting them and
yeah,
having the
because they're
skill.
gone also.
And
How can we meet them? They're gone.
right, but you know what? That doesn't stop us when we read about individuals in the past, when we read Shakespeare, when we read Cervantes. We place maybe not labels, but we do try to understand the characters. And we don't shy away necessarily from saying, well, that individual's characteristics are consistent with that individual appears through the way the author describes them as being someone that nowadays we consider to be. And we might even put labels or diagnoses like OCD or anxiety or autism or ADHD, or negative like labels like narcissism. We can read a story and we read about King Lear and we can describe King Lear even though we've never met him. And I think the same method can apply here as well. I haven't researched any other individual to the same degree, and I'm not sure how much information we have about many individuals. So this is purely speculative. But I know there have been efforts to suggest, for example, whether it's Einstein or Mozart or other famous individuals in history. And I'd only say that it wouldn't surprise me. I think there's no reason to think that someone who had that unique talent,
Yeah,
that someone who had that special drive and ability, and also from the information we have, was also unusual, was also different in their
yeah.
interactions with others. It wouldn't surprise me if they indeed were on the autism spectrum as well.
Why I ask you this question? Because if you look toward the work, maybe Tesla or maybe other scientists, if you look toward, they were isolated. They don't go to people. They were living in isolation. And there are many scientists who leave the place and they went to some other place, maybe 1 year or 2 year, and they put themselves. So it is more like special interest, which lead them to find a solution for the problem. Because if you look toward maybe individual, if you look toward a human being, if there's a problem, then they would like to find a solution for that. So people were afraid of dark. Light is a solution for that. People were maybe scared, or maybe they used to feel cold. The solution was fire. So that is always a problem, and they look for solution. And when you have so much dedication to that thing, then you find a solution for that. I think that is happening over
Right,
everywhere
it's a
now.
very interesting thought that it takes that particular degree, a combination of an interest, but where do our interests come from? And sometimes our interests do come from something that bothers us. And if something bothers us, it's part of human nature too, I think, to try to come up with some form of solution. So maybe that's a very interesting thought as well. And maybe that is what was going on with Joseph when he heard Pharaoh's dream. Not only did he feel this commitment, this need to try to interpret the dream, but because he was able to see that the dream meant that there would be years of not only feast, but also famine,
Yeah,
he also felt that need to come up with the solution, as you
yeah,
said, to come up
exactly.
with an answer. To come up, that's a very interesting thought. So I see we're at about the hour of
Yeah,
our
exactly. But
meeting,
the
and
discussion
I
was
do
so
have to
amazing,
run.
and that was so thought provoking for me, because when we are reading something, we are we have a different aspect if we look toward the religious side of, because my background is different, your background is different. I am Muslim. Our way of looking toward things are different. If we look toward our prophets, if we look toward their books, if something happened before, but even then we read them, and there must be a reason why we read and we keep on reading them. And there's also some form of consistency in that text too. Like it is so well written that you cannot change something, and one sentence is there which have a whole history behind one sentence. So it's not just something random thoughts, it's always history behind that. And that wisdom came from experiences, came from years of experiences. But I would say that thank you so much for the discussion that we have. That was very, thought for provoking for me. It's like a soul food for me when I have those, maybe different discussion, difficult discussion. But I enjoy talking to you today, and that was very thoughtful for me and giving me a different perspective. And thank you so much. And I would like to uh, wish, like it's my wish that you write more books like that. If you have, I don't know what is your, everybody have their own uh, goals in their life, but it would be a good thing that you write more books just like that. So people give this idea that
Thank you.
why integration is important, why inclusion is important, especially when we look toward the workplace. And how the if we start looking toward neurodiversity in different perspective, it is going to help a lot of people, because it was always there. It's not a new thing, it was always there. And people are struggling from our ancestor time. It's not like just, we are not just struggling right now, but we are struggling for so long. And people are finding solution, and they live with that, like they have successful life beside their struggle. So thank you so much. Any last thought you want to give, and then we will just wrap up this
So
discussion.
I think the connection's cutting out. So thank you. I look forward to being in touch. Thank you very much.
I hope to see you in some other discussion with some interesting topic. Thank you so much. Bye bye.